Maybe you like cooking. Maybe you don't. Either way, the new Blue Apron is for you. Because along with our classic meal kits, we're offering new pre-made and one-pan meals to help you get dinner on the table fast. And now there's no subscription needed, so you can just order and enjoy. Do delicious food your way. Shop 100 plus meals at blueapron.com. Get 50% off your first 2 orders with code APRON50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Thanks for listening to No Question About That. You can support this show by visiting patreon.com/NQATpod or in your Apple podcast feed. We do a backer show each week going deep dive into a topic related to United. Or if you don't want to part with your cash, an even better way is to leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And now on with the show. Welcome to No Question About That. This is United Inc., our finance pod with Jamie, also known as Subprime. How's it hanging, Jamie? You prime or subprime these days?
Subprime, potentially moving towards prime.
All right. That's it. It's Manchester United turning it around. Ruben Amorim, manager of the month. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, the momentum is there. The snow is moving down the mountain, potentially turning into an avalanche. We'll see tomorrow against Spurs. I'm fortunate enough to be heading there, although
nice.
I might have different thoughts after the game. I've just got a nagging feeling.
Well, we have a particularly bad record against Spurs these days. Lost 4 times in a row, I think. It's
and it's like, another team that's been on, a bit of a horrible run, particularly at home, and then the game before they play us, all of a sudden, they knock in 4 goals, beat a team against 10 men, potentially a Puskas Award contender for this year, and you're like, here we go again.
Yeah. Just don't let Mickey van der Ven run in a straight line like as fast as possible. Just trip him, foul him. Anyone, just kick him. Anyway, this is a finance show, not a football show. We're going to talk about 1 year of Rúben Amorim and the finances behind it. Have a think about what some of it means. Some of it are hard numbers. Some of it's an opportunity lost, including that European final against Spurs. Start from the beginning, shall we?
Yeah.
And what it cost to hire him, which is kind of, because most of this is public, right? So from United's accounts, we know it was about 14.5 million to fire Erik ten Hag and his team. What a great use of money that was.
Yeah.
Deary me.
And I don't know, now we've seen a lot of discourse around, 1 year of Ruben Amorim. And I think, also not only Sir Jim, but Jason Wilcox, I think, owning up to the fact that, that first summer in charge was less than ideal, I think, to put it mildly. And, I think both of us have been pretty critical about that move there at Ten Hag. I mean, look, hindsight, 2020, the cost of firing Ten Hag, obviously augmented by the fact that we extended his contract. I do think that the leaders were in a no-win situation, right? Like, they could not let Ten Hag run into the last year of his contract without doing something. Right. And they clearly weren't prepped enough to be able to make a decisive decision going into, post the FA Cup final. Some people will criticize them for that. I do have sympathy, right? Like, they were going into arguably a burning building at the time. And, everyone has their first 100 days, try and sort things out. United probably needed 200 days because there was just so much misalignment, I think, through the organisation. But a very, very costly decision, which, when we get into the transfer numbers, becomes even more consequential.
Yeah, absolutely. Wilcox talked about it. We'll go through this a little bit later in the pod, talked about it on the Inside United podcast, which, I've got thoughts on that podcast and how you can make it better. Hey, Manchester United, I know you fired all your content people, but if you want some If you want some advice, I'm here. Yeah. All right. Yes, £14.5 million, incredibly expensive mistake, basically, to extend that contract. But I understand why they didn't want to leave him as a lame duck. That could it have been worse? I mean, not much. There wasn't further United could have sunk. Yeah.
We say that, we did. We did sink further.
We did. 13th United were on the 1st of November when Ruben Amorim was officially appointed. We ended up 15th. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So £14.5 million to fire Ten Hag. There was about a £10 million cost to hire Ruben Amorim from Sporting. United paid the buyout clause and a little extra to get him early because Sporting were 6-month gardening leave. I think it ended up being 10 days. He had a couple of extra matches, didn't he? Yeah. Got his coaching team as well. The only number I could find publicly for his salary was an estimate from The Sun at $6.5 million, but ballpark, fair enough. That's pretty much where Ten Hag was. So that sounds about reasonable.
Yeah, and I think he was on 3. So it probably makes sense that a club of Sporting stature versus club at United stature, £6 million is 2-3% of the wage bill.
Yeah,
which by industry standards kind of makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that there's kind of now a market for a transfer market for managers or coaches, and I think in the context of the overall rebuild, if it proves to be successful, I don't think we would look at that fee as being overly consequential. But again, when we kind of total all these costs up, done a number of pieces referring to, United kitchen sinking things, they really have gone to town in terms of kitchen sinking the overall business and the football side in order to make this work. And it requires a lot of faith. Yeah.
Yep. Well, look, I've referred to it previously on the pod and people have pushed back, but the analysis from The Athletic that Liverpool looked at Ruben Amorim and thought they'd have to spend £500 million rebuilding their squad. Funny thing is they've spent £500 million rebuilding it for Slot, and probably we will spend similar amount, right? So if you look at the transfer spend under Ruben Amorim, it's about, I've got my numbers here, about 240-ish million, if you include all the add-ons. So Dorgu, Sescu, Lomons, Bueno and Cunha, plus add-ons, 240-ish gross. There's going to be a net out once Rashford and Højlund and Anthony, include the Anthony sale, are all completed, which let's just make the assumption they will. So it'll be significantly less than that after all of that. But probably likely another similar spend next summer, assuming United can afford it. So it's going to be we've had a £30 million swing on hiring Amorim and firing Ten Hag, and a couple £100 million on the first phase of his rebuild so far.
Yeah, and I actually think it could be more, right? If you look at how many players that are over the next 2 years are probably going to be required in some way, shape or form, you're looking at 8 to 10, right? At a minimum. Average transfer fees for those, I mean, if you put it at £50 million in the current market, quick maths tells you that's 500 gross. Now, there will be some players where we can fetch fees for, but there will be quite a lot where we can't, right? Will someone be coming in to buy Casemiro? Probably not.
No.
Obviously, we're not going to get a fee for Sancho. Similarly for Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, no. They're all kind of the wrong side of 30. And we're thinking about non-financial metrics, but age, experience, knowing what it's like to be in the pressure cooker of Manchester United. Those are all players which I think at least short term are probably going to stay. Question mark about Casemiro, might have to renegotiate things, but it's going to be a significant amount of money.
Yeah, I think that's all right. You did a piece of analysis on Twitter. Was it on your Substack as well? Can't remember.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Subprime Goals on Substack. Go check it out. It's very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So, yes, I agree with you. If we take the previously reported idea that they give players 2 years to prove themselves at United, so Højlund is a good example of that. and if they think not, they'll go. Also, the age profile of the squad. We do have quite a few younger players, but probably not enough in the 25 to 28 range. Obviously, they went there with Mbeumo and Cunha this year. So Harry Maguire will probably get a contract extension. Luke Shaw won't. He's through to 27 anyway. Casemiro runs out this summer. Unless he wants to half his wages, he probably won't get another year, given the cost. Although the cost of replacing him will be extremely significant as well. And if we're in European football, we know just how much his body sort of deteriorates if he's trying to play twice a week. So I think you're right. A lot of big questions over probably, you're right, 8 to 10 players, both underperformers, like, I don't know, let's say Manuel Ugarte, just to pick on him.
Yeah.
And what you do with them. Yeah.
And so, sorry, he's a perfect example, right? And I think, what you said there about Højlund was exactly right. It didn't really get talked about that much, but Omar Barada's 2-year rule, Højlund had kind of come to the end of that. Now, you could argue bit harsh, potentially, but it's kind of showing the players, the hand in terms of how this club is going to be managed going forward. And I think, we'll get onto midfield probably at some point, but there's a world in which all 4 midfielders that we've got will not be at the club in 2 years' time. I don't think,
absolutely, yeah.
I don't think it will be exactly like that, but that's pretty significant.
Yeah. No, I think you could certainly make that argument. Ugarte, I think, is a very good candidate unless there's a miracle turnaround for a sale. They will break even on Ugarte. Someone will pay. Well, what do we pay for him? 50 million euros or something. Yeah,
I think base fee was in the 40s. Once you take into account amortization, I was looking at this. I think the break-even fee is about 23 to 25 million. Yeah. Like, I think you could fetch that easily.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Bruno is a real question. I mean, his performances in terms of metrics, again, finance show, not football show, are off the charts still. It's funny, the focus on the negative side of Bruno, which is minor compared to the positive side. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox again, but honestly, you cannot make a case that involves any kind of data and analysis that Bruno is not performing at elite levels. So there's a question mark again this summer. He is 31. He doesn't feel like he's slowing down yet, but what kind of fee would you get for him, and what would it cost to replace him as an upgrade? Is the calculation you need to make. Wilcox talked about this in his interview. He said age profile, performances, cost. We look at all of those, and of course those are the pillars. Kobbie Mainoo, I think if I was betting right now, we're erring towards a permanent sale if Amorim is staying. I of course want him to stay. I think he's a wonderful prospect, but not if you're playing 10 minutes every 2 weeks. And United would get a big fee for him. So the temptation there, I imagine, from the bean counters would be to sell. White, we talked about, and Casemiro is running out of contract. So you're quite right. We could, over the next 2 years, want to make 4 purchases. They won't all go in the same summer. No, I think it's a really difficult one to do that.
Yeah, and I was probably being a little bit provocative there. I do think Mainoo will ultimately end up staying. I think, forget the whole, we need a youth player who's of first team quality in the team. I just think it's, all of these players are going through an adaptation period. And I think that's all that Mainoo's going through. Yes, he, to quote Michael Richards, burst onto the scene. But, we've seen it with Ahmad. We've seen it with Yoro. Young players do go up and down slightly. They're not super consistent. So, look, I think the context probably means that the noise around Mainoo is heightened. But, are we realistically going to see a scenario where we go out and buy 4 midfielders? Because I'm not sure there's anyone in the youth setup that's probably going to be able to take on that mantle.
Not ready just yet. I mean, I am looking at the Fletcher brothers and Jim Thwaites as real big talents. Again, finance, not finance, but Jim Thwaites, it doesn't half. You watch him, you go, if you squint, is that Paul Scholes? Hang on. His movement is there. Yeah. Anyway, bit early there, but yeah, real prospect. All right. I wanted to have a think about some of the opportunity costs as well. I mean, this is a bit more hypothetical, but it's around about £3.5 million per place in the Premier League. That can go up and down with facility fees. So how many times your there's prize money for each place, and then there's facility fees for how many times you're on television, and of course, if you're attractive, like United generally are, but if you're in big games, you get more times on television.
Yeah.
And then there's the overall pool share that you get both from domestic and international rights. So how it breaks down. So let's say about 3.5 million. What was United's slippage? I mean, at points last season, we were like, hey, European places, look up. We ended up looking down. So if you go from 8th the year before to 15th, that's 7 places. So it's about £25 million as the lost income there. I mean, I don't know how you frame that really, but it's significant when you start adding it all up.
It's a dorgu.
Yeah.
Quite simply.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
And, it gives you, I think the other thing, and we've talked about it in the past, but when we think about your negotiating power, right, people knew that we were in a bit of a bind in terms of financially. I think going into kind of the next few transfer windows, we're not going to be anywhere like close to that. And, we can stomach keeping some players on that we may not necessarily want to, which obviously helps your negotiating position. But all of these things, I think, on the opportunity cost, to me, particularly when we look at last summer's transfer activity, they all point to negotiating power and flexibility to do deals. Yeah. And look, they've talked a lot about how, made the investment, the learning investment by hiring Ruben Amorim earlier than he wanted. But I think you can easily say that it's had a direct impact on probably the time frame of a turnaround. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if they went for a slightly different manager that might have been more suited to the current squad, you could have seen a quicker turnaround. I do err on the side of this squad needed tearing apart because it was a mishmash of players from different coaches.
Yeah. So
I'm more sympathetic to the argument that it's just like we needed to do this, whatever. So let's just take the hit. But £25 million is a significant cost, just as one pillar on its own.
Yeah, United certainly have a Frankenstein squad because there's been a set of managers over the past 5-6 years that have had completely different philosophies. The risk, of course, in saying, one, we want to tear the squad apart. I mean, there's a massive cost to doing that, and it's a signal to the market, it's a negotiation position, all that kind of stuff. But if it doesn't work out for Rúben Amorim, can you find another manager that has a similar philosophy? And I think in their transfer activity, they've been thinking about that too. They haven't bought too many players who couldn't play in another system.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Dorgu, but he played most of his career at left back anyway, just as an attacking left back. So, yeah.
I do think that point is really interesting, right? Like when you boil it down, the really specialist position in this formation is the wing backs, and you might be a little bit you might have a few too many centre backs. If you actually look at what they've done, they bought quite young on the centre backs, so it gives them optionality. And in terms of wing backs, okay, we were in for Quenda once upon a time, but they've only bought him one. So they actually have managed that risk pretty well, right? They've given him a lot of money and they fixed some glaring deficiencies in the squad, but they haven't gone all in yet.
No, I think you're completely right there. And I suspect that will continue to be the case because they have to think about the risk profile there. Yeah, Patrick Dorgu, Diego Leon, who's playing with the under-21s at the moment. So it's a very low-risk bet, that one. Of course, we know Harry Amas has a lot of talent, doing well with Sheffield Wednesday. And Bendito Mantato, they've shifted to left-back. And he's playing left-back for England, under-17s at the World Cup at the moment. Doing very well, apparently. So they have a lot of options there, all on the young side. it will be a question for this summer, surely, on both wing-back positions and what kind of bets they want to make. All right, we were on the opportunity cost. So I talked about the league slippage. Europa League earnings were probably in the 30 to 35 million pound range on prize money. There were all the extra games as well, and United make 4 to 5 million per game. So probably did quite well out of the Europa League, given that we had 17 games in the Europa League. Not Champions League level well, but decent finances.
And I think the ticket prices are obviously a hot topic of debate, but may not have been quite at Champions League premium levels. And I think I had the prize money at something like 30 million euros. So look, give or take, it probably would have been net, I don't know, 50 million pounds impact.
Yeah.
Obviously not being in the Champions League this year, and from a revenue perspective, probably about 100 million pounds hit. So that is the prize money, the games and sponsorship deals directly from Adidas.
And it can be even more than that. But yeah, if you pick somewhere in the middle, that's 100 million pounds is a totally fair number. Yeah,
and I do. So the way I think about it, though, it's about 50 million net impact. So once you take into account that the player wages also increase by being in the Champions League, net, you're probably thinking about a 50 million benefit. Fair. When we think about, the long-term financial health of the club, one, that's immediately another player. Two, when we think about sponsorships, Tezos expired the end of last summer. DXC, I believe, is expiring this summer. You are just a less attractive asset, right?
Yeah.
You've got fewer games, you've got less exposure. So, no matter how good Mark Armstrong is, it's hard to sign super lucrative sponsorship deals in that environment.
Absolutely. It's not quite lipstick on a pig, but we are, getting porcine-like at the moment. If you look at United's total revenue against European competition, we're slipping down the table, right? We might have had record numbers this year, but that will not be the case once 25-26 is completed because of the lack of European football and the financial hit from Adidas and so on, and the contracts that are running out. So we've been overtaken by Real Madrid, certainly, who are spinning ahead. Manchester City, Liverpool are very, very close to us on total revenue numbers. Arsenal will get there this year.
Liverpool will overtake us.
Yeah, they will this year, for sure. Bayern Munich overtook us quite significantly. They calculate, it's a bit harder because they calculate certain seats as commercial revenue. So the split is more difficult, but their total revenue is higher than ours. Paris Saint-Germain, certainly higher than ours. So, once upon a time, United were 1 or 2 and kind of traded places with Real Madrid and maybe Barcelona were top for 1 year. Their revenue will shoot up, by the way, once Camp Nou is fully open. Probably a 250 million euro boost, which it was for Real Madrid.
For the audio listeners, I was pointing up. I think it will be closer to 3. I think it will be 300 million plus.
Which you can see why United are not only for thinking about what has to be done in terms of infrastructure, but the net benefit of spending money on a new stadium. Even if you add £100 million a year to the cost or whatever through financing, the benefit of having a partially indoor-outdoor multi-use venue is significant, which is why they wanted the canopy, and they're still negotiating with Freightliner over that land deal. Freightliner, piece of industrial land in West Manchester, not worth £500 million. I know that, and I'm not a property developer.
I did hear that they got acquired, though, so that might help things.
Well, they had some Kuwaiti money, didn't they? At one stage, Freightliner, yeah. It's kind of very interesting ownership. If you start digging into that, which I did at one point when I was bored one day. So, yes, I mean, this is significant. United have, Ed Woodward's old quote that he said one time on an investor call that, what we do in the commercial market has no relevance to the pitch, or the other way around, in fact. It was totally wrong. He was completely and provably wrong, and there are many, many years of receipts now, and United are not the commercial juggernaut that they once were. And that's a hard turnaround for Ratcliffe and his team, and whatever Glazers are left once they finally decide to sell their shares, if they ever do. All right, so we talked about cash outlay, we've talked about opportunity savings. Can we talk about PSR and wages for a little bit? I know you've done tons of analysis on that. You mentioned earlier that United probably aren't in a PSR difficult position at the moment. We kind of saw this through the Athletics reporting as well, and how United structure it. So, but let's go through that a little bit.
Yeah, so let's start at the transfer end of things, because I think actually when we think about United as an organisation and how it's moving as a footballing organisation, I think this is the area where you can say with a reasonable degree of certainty, now that we have enough evidence, that we are acting like a sensible football club. We're making boring decisions, aka sensible decisions, that are actually kind of, I think, improving the overall financial health of the business. So, we talked about a significant amount of gross spend earlier, 250 odd million pounds this summer. Net, obviously, since Amorim's come in, that's actually about 185. But then when we think about the PSR impact, we've actually made 50 million pounds worth of savings. Mm-hmm. And obviously, sales of Garnacho improves that, but we've actually made a PSR saving, excluding the impact of player trading profit, round about 15 million pounds. And so I think when you look at where the squad is now and the direction it's moving for the expenditure, I think we're in a considerably better position. I think we'll be probably about break even on a profit before tax basis, maybe slightly loss making. But then when you do all of the add backs for PSR calculations, so what you invest in youth, which is around 30 million pounds, the women's team, there's like depreciation and a few other elements that go in, actually will probably be like broadly break even. And for the Premier League, you're allowed 35 million pounds a year. For UEFA on a 3-year cycle, you need to be break even. So actually, considering where we were 2 years ago, cash is still a bit of an issue, but PSR should be no longer an issue.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at it on a squad cost basis, United are in a very good position. Historically, had in the past been a sub 50% wages to turnover ratio, not quite there at the moment, bit north of that, but in a very good position relative to most other clubs around Europe. There's likely to be a vote quite soon in the Premier League to whether they're going to take up squad cost rule for next season. They didn't. They delayed it. I think the idea is to kind of match UEFA's provisions. There's a bit of disagreement amongst the clubs about how to do that, including this kind of pegging idea where there's a maximum cap of wages compared to the bottom team's revenue, prize money and broadcasting. It's a bit artificial, but they were arguing at about 5. So, £500 million a year maximum wage, but no one's anywhere near that in the Premier League. So it's kind of theoretical at the moment. But if we move to squad cost, United are in a good position. Cash is still a little bit of an issue because there's just a humongous amount of debt still, but in a relatively decent position after all the restructuring at United. Yeah.
And look, on the anchoring piece, as you say, like most clubs won't come in.
Anchoring's a much better word than pegging, by the way.
I think they did slightly change the discourse on it. But I don't know why. Yeah. I have no idea why.
I have no idea why. I don't know whether Apple flagged that or anything like that. We will be demonetized on YouTube as a result of talking about this.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of the anchoring rule. I just don't really see how it makes that much sense. And look, the reality is, all the clubs are incentivized to bargain together when it comes to Premier League distribution, Premier League TV rights. It benefits everyone, right? Anchoring probably skews you more kind of towards that direction. But, the other leagues are going after that sort of that pie as well in terms of what broadcasters are willing to pay and frequently what non-broadcasters are willing to pay. You've got non-league teams that are going to be streamed live on Twitch very, very soon. You've got Serie A trying to getting bankers to broker deals with them on TV distribution money. La Liga are obviously looking at overseas games as well as Serie A, Bundesliga, going through YouTube. That is an area where the clubs will I don't think they will be complacent, and I'm not sure you necessarily need anchoring to kind of increase that collective bargaining power or the push.
Yeah.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn and I hire wrong. So our orders get all backed up. We're drowning in paperwork, then actually drowning, careless fighting off sharks with a stapler, and pirates are pillaging the office copier, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant goes beyond the resume, using unique insights to deliver a smarter shortlist. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's about relative competitiveness, but yes, the Premier League is relatively very competitive. I mean, we see the three teams that came out from the Championship last season doing pretty well. Unlikely that it's going to be 3 up, 3 down this year. By the looks of it, we're a third of the way into the season or whatever. Not quite there yet, but it is pretty competitive, the Premier League. I mean, of course, in the past, the relative distance between top club and bottom club in terms of revenue was much closer. But given the massive pool of money compared to other leagues, the bottom club in the Premier League can buy very high quality players from Europe. And we see that happening over and over again, given their pool of money. And I think we've proven that it makes an attractive product. You could make an argument from a Manchester United perspective, hey, if we went to individual bargaining rather than collective, United would get even more money, right? Almost certainly, because it's very attractive. But the league as a whole would be much less attractive. We've seen that in La Liga, right? Barcelona, Real Madrid, nice fat TV contracts. Atletico, sort of, nobody else makes any money at all. That's not good for the league. It's even worse in France, where it's a one-team league. And John Textor talked about it, didn't he? About it ruining the inability of France to sell any TV rights at all. Because, why watch it when you know who's going to win?
Totally. And look, we touched on PSG's revenue earlier. Despite them winning the Champions League, if you actually kind of take out the impact of that, the revenue across the rest of the business, so match day and commercial, actually fell year over year. Now, the TV, they had some issues with DAZN in terms of DAZN not wanting to pay out on the last year of that TV contract because they didn't get get people subscribing. But I think that's a pretty powerful indicator of the competitive position that the Premier League are in. And, they're going to be moving to their own streaming platform for international TV, probably by 2030, I think. Mm-hmm. Depending on how that goes, you may then see that for domestic broadcasting, which I think should be, in theory, a good thing for consumers.
Yep, absolutely. The fragmentation of those rights forced by the European Union has not been a good thing, I don't think, for consumers. It was a consumer argument that this was anti-competitive, that Sky could buy all the packages in one go, but it just means that consumers have to buy 3 different TV rights packages if you can stream that. I mean, it's all about the elasticity of demand, isn't it? Right. So if you're going to stream, how much are consumers willing to pay to do that? And the same with seat pricing. We see this. Every single club is looking at seat pricing, going, we're at top clubs. We are leaving money on the table. And how do we differentiate between consumers who are willing to pay £300 for a match and those who want to pay £30 for a match? Same with streaming. Everyone looks at that and they have to play around with it. All the streaming platforms do this. Can you tell I've done quite a bit of work in the media industry? So It's and you look at what you actually look at is the total wallet size, right, for consumers for entertainment and how many they're prepared to have in their wallet, right? And if Premier League go to a streaming platform at some point, Premflix or something like that, and I agree it's a few years off. They want to test it first, rather than having the kind of sugar high of a broadcaster guaranteeing you the money. There's a whole bunch of things that they will have to do that they don't do now, right? Consumer data is the really big one, right? So think about Disney when they went from being a B2B essentially company where they sold their TV product to other cable companies and broadcasters, which is what the Premier League do, to selling it directly to a consumer. You have to understand the consumer really, really deeply so you can segment them and upsell, downsell to get the sweet spot of the pricing piece.
Media and entertainment 101 for our listeners there.
Absolutely, yeah. 101 being my level of knowledge, probably.
No, you put it in a way that everyone can understand.
Yeah, very good. All right, one final piece to look at the 1 year of Amorim before we talk about Wilcox. The share price has done some funny things over this year. So it obviously spiked a little bit during the takeover negotiations. You'd expect that. Probably less of a spike than might have happened given the final share price. It dropped quite precipitously after the Europa League final, and then it's been creeping up again on speculation from randos on Twitter, Saudi Arabian princes and that kind of thing. But yeah, when you think about it in those terms, you get these wild swings of hundreds of millions of pounds, dollars, when you go up 10 or 20%, which it has done.
I don't know. I think the thing to remember, particularly for companies that have prospective M&A, there are a lot of funds out there, and now it's increasingly done by algorithmic trading that will be placing bets on potential takeover candidates. And so I think that kind of causes a lot of volatility in the Manchester United share price. We've covered this on a previous pod. Do I think there will be some sort of capital activity, in the next 18 months? Probably. Do we know where it will come from? No, but the most likely outcome I still believe is, an Ineos Sir Jim Ratcliffe deal, potentially involving something with stadium funding. I do find it funny that people, share price is typically a reflection of the news that's out there in the market.
Yeah.
It often gets spun as this is an indicator of what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's a lagging indicator, actually, because people price in future activity already. Also, United shares, number of shares sold is just tiny. It's, you and I could probably move the share price by buying a few shares.
I mean, I'd love to think that I could, but I'm not sure I could.
No, not true. It's just so few shares are sold.
Yeah.
It's probably sub 1% of the total volume of a FTSE 100 company. So, all right, shall we talk about Ruben Amorim, Jason Wilcox's interview this week? It's probably his first major interview since getting the big job at United. He talked to Inside United, which is the new official podcast. Inside Carrington, sorry. What's the official Manchester United podcast? Once upon a time with...
Yeah, I think that's what
it is
called.
Still the official one. It's just not called the official Manchester United podcast. Yeah. It's funny. Once upon a time, it was very good when they launched it with Sam Homewood and David May and Helen Evans. There's quite a lot of banter and had some good guests on there. I think they need to warm up a little bit. This one with Liam Bradford and Helen Evans and Phil Jones was quite dry, I'd say. Need a little bit more flirtation between them,
You need amazing.
We'll get there.
just to grease the wheels a little bit.
Well, exactly, yeah. You need someone to disrupt it a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but Wilcox spoke for half hour or so. He talked about his role, the scope of the role, and how they think about all of that. But I thought the interesting parts were how they think about transfers and just how far ahead of time. So you touched on it earlier, the chaotic nature of Ineos's first transfer window. He said It was much more chaos than we had this year planned out. We knew who we wanted. And almost certainly they're thinking about next summer in this fashion as well, as you said. Sensible football management, and probably a very boring but sensible person in charge there. So it's interesting he said, so it's not just transfers, it's squad planning, it's operations. So facilities come under him as well, including new guy from Brentford, effectively football COO, medical, data and analytics. So he has all these departments under him now. What did you make of the interview and its sort of impact on United's operations and finances?
A lot of it was music to my ears, right? It was nuts and bolts. What are the sensible things that we should be doing and thinking about when trying to run the footballing operations of Manchester United? I think, there was a couple of sound bites in there, we're not trying to buy the Harlem Globetrotters, know, pointed remark, as there have been many at kind of the previous regimes. I think it's absolutely right. I am a believer that you have to evolve and you have to adapt and you have to change. That doesn't mean you need to kind of rip up the playbook. And actually, if you think about how the overall executive is talking, a lot of it is actually kind of, in my eyes, mirroring that evolution that we had under Sir Alex Ferguson. The talk about Cunha being a Cantona-like player, whether you believe it or not.
But
whether you believe it or not, but it feels like they're trying to invoke this sort of image. I think a lot of what Jason Wilcox was talking about, particularly on how they're planning for the squad, is also very similar to that. I think Ferguson had I can't remember if he actually stated this, but it felt like almost like a golden rule where it's like a third of the squad is under 23, a third of the squad is 23 to 28 or 30, and then a third of the squad is kind of like your old experience head. So you constantly have this conveyor belt that's reproducing the same culture, and then the tactics will tweak and as the footballing landscape evolves. So I think from that perspective, it was very good. I also like the fact that I feel like we're being pragmatic, right? Like if we miss out on a target, which, we did in Liam Delap, we will flex plans accordingly. Now, look, life isn't perfect, and so that will mean that mistakes are made. But I think that level of pragmatism is something that we probably haven't had before because it's felt like all or nothing. I do think there was a reasonable amount of spin, though. I think, I can't remember if he actually said it in the in the podcast or not, but this idea that Cunha and Mbeumo were always on the list, I don't know. I'm not sure how true that is, and that like Lamons was always on the list. Not sure, because if that was true, then I'm not sure how we would have financed it, because I don't think clearly Baleba was a target, and I'm not sure how you do Cunha and Mbeumo, a striker, Baleba, and Lamons.
Well, I would think about it like this. They think about the squad, as you say, partially young, partially in the prime years and partially old. That's a very, very sensible way of thinking about it. I mean, we shouldn't have to discuss it, really, And just in terms of operations, before I get to the main point, if you think about like where Liverpool and Arsenal, say, have been, or maybe City, they're slightly different beasts, obviously. We're probably 5 years behind Arsenal and 10 behind Liverpool in terms of like the operations. You can make that up, though. It's not going to take 10 years for a turnaround. But coming back to the squad planning, I imagine they had 5, 6, 8, 10 players for each position that they were thinking about. And so when you say they were always on our list, yes, of course, they were always on our list. But, the pragmatism, because as much as you can have plans 12 months out, other clubs don't play ball. We saw very close with Brentford. They might not have played ball in the end over Mbeumo, and happened to do the Cunha deal first because of the buyout clause, right? That probably had an impact on the price that we paid for Brentford. Almost certainly, same price, basically. Yeah. So they're going to have to be pragmatic, but within an organised structure that says, "Hey, we know how to properly operate this football club for God's sake, for the first time in 10 years." As many things as the Ineos Ratcliffe regime have got wrong, and they've got lots wrong from a fan perspective.
Yeah.
The operational side of things, I think, is completely right. It's been unbelievably painful to get to this point. And they will get it wrong. Of course, they will get things wrong on the transfer part, because as Jim has said, that's the thing that makes the most difference.
Yeah.
But if we get 8 out of 10 right rather than 8 out of 10 wrong, and I would argue over the 12 years post-Fergie or 11 post-Fergie before we started making the change, we probably did get 8 out of 10 wrong in terms of transfers. So it's got to be 8 out of 10 right, and you're going to be in a relatively good position.
Excuse me, totally. And I think that other point about how far ahead we're looking, I think it points to this view that whilst we have the Project 150 that's been put out there, being able to challenge for the league, they put that out there, but they're not actually speaking to it all that much. Like Omar Barada makes the odd reference to it. But if you listen to Sir Jim, if you listen to Jason, he also did a speech at the Former Players Association dinner.
Yes, yeah.
They have all talked pretty consistently as to how long that this will take, that it is a 3 to 5 year journey despite having that target. So I think it's this thing where they're being pragmatic about how long it could take, but always trying to outperform that.
Yeah. I think that's a fair way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah, and there was one interesting thing, which I'm not sure many people picked up on it, but I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. It was probably a net negative, but he talked about the women's team, and it was a very passing comment about how, I can't remember the exact wording. It might have been that it either does report to Colette Roche or it may do in the future, and she will have an influence there. That was one point where I was like, okay, I understand the financial and business rationale to, we need to get the men's team right, but I don't think that should necessarily be at the expense of the women's team. And I think, that we still do need to get that part of the equation right.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, there's a kind of ethical, moral argument just to say, this is Manchester United. All our teams should have the top focus, right? From a financial point of view, you can certainly argue, given the scale of what happens in men's football, if United are at the top of the Premier League and being successful in the Champions League, you then have the headroom to invest in women's football. That's appears to me to be the way they're thinking. Get the men's bit right first, and then we'll think about the operations on the women's side. I've made this argument before, though. It is so much easier to get it right on the women's side because of the finances. Right now in women's football, in 3 to 5 years' time, women's football will be double the size financially it is now, and it'll be much harder for United to get it right? So the 3 or 4 or 5 million pound investment right now will be utterly transformational for the women's side squad. Infrastructure, operations, having a proper director of football in there, proper leadership and investment in the squad and the team, which you can make, right? Cross promotion. It's a very, very small cost. Diego Leon sized cost to the women's team, completely transformational. So I understand kind of, and you get a lot of people online making this argument as well. Look at the size of the finances. I'm just making the argument that investment now has a much, much bigger relative payoff for women's football and the success of that Manchester United team, the Manchester United team, than waiting. So I'm not sure I entirely agree with their approach here, but I kind of get where they, I think you've got it spot on in terms of how they're thinking.
Yeah,
I think they could probably adjust that.
Totally. And look, I was actually at a breakfast this week, and there was an England Lioness there, and she was talking about, actually from the commercial side of things, how the sponsorship and marketing of it is evolving. And I didn't realize this, but Elf Beauty, so a growing beauty business, they actually kind of started sponsoring the Spurs women team. But then there was a positive externality where they expanded the relationship to be part of, I believe it's the Spurs men's training kit.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where clearly there are brands that are taking notice of this, wanting to get involved. And if you're on the right side of that trend early on, you put yourself in a much better position. And look, we've had the first £1 million female footballer this summer. You've had Michelle Kang investing into the London City Lionesses, putting in significant amount of money in training facilities. Crux Capital is another women's football focused fund that's deploying funds at the moment into the market.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a number of years, but I think it will be there.
Some of this is where finance comes from, right? So finance bros dominate private equity, venture capital markets, and the money flows accordingly. You can also make that argument on ethnic minorities as well, right? So, and it's like ridiculous given the makeup of the global population. 50% of the global population are women. It's really very stupid and basic. I've spent a long time working in venture capital funds. It's really disgusting how the money is distributed. When we think about football, like men and women watch men's football, men and women watch women's football, but there's a skew in women's football a little bit, right? And there's a market you can capture there that is not served necessarily well by the men's football arena. And, coming back to Manchester United and the finances, the opportunity there to capture brands that want to be involved in this is huge, but it's hard to do that if you're not successful. So Anyway, soapbox time, but I think there's a very good financial argument to make the investment, basically. So, all right, have we covered everything? Were we going to do everything else? 1 year of Rúben Amorim, it's been interesting on the pitch. I mean, we recency bias allows us to be kind of positive, manager of the month. We've had a lot of structural change off it, not necessarily Ruben led, but he's got the big job of making whatever Jason Wilcox, Omar Barada and Jim Ratcliffe give him, making that successful.
And now he's got potentially another transformational transfer window coming up.
I think I said this the other day. It's sometimes you can make a rational argument for not taking a risk in January. I mean, United will certainly spend money next summer, and Ruben will be around for it. I imagine the wheels fall off for the rest of the season. Seems unlikely. But January, United probably won't spend big, but you could certainly say chasing the dream right now makes a lot of sense. Given the finances we've just talked about, the difference between no European football and European football, or Europa League football and Champions League football, and given the points gap in the Premier League and how tight it is, we're 2 points behind City. Yeah. And the gaps in the squad, either at wing back or central midfield, like what might make sense in terms of spending money right now and chasing that dream, seems to me to be a very rational bet.
Yeah, and also if you look at the players that have been mooted, the finances and the financials of what those deals may look like, there is a supply-demand imbalance in the sense of there are more players out there on the market than the potential buyers, which is a good thing. The sellers are, and I'm talking about for Stuttgart, Brighton, Palace, Forest, they all need to sell players to, be sustainable. You're kind of putting them in a position potentially where it's like, okay, if one of you don't accept a good deal, you may not get anything. And so it's that whole, I'm not even sure what it's not game theory, but it's something along those lines.
Prisoner's dilemma, you're thinking about. Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting, that one. So we're talking about Angelo Stiller, Elliot Anderson, Adam Wharton and Carlos Baleba. I'm sure they are all on Manchester United's long list of central midfield players.
Yeah.
Different profiles, of course, and everyone will have their favourites. And, Elliot Anderson is flavour of the month right now, having a brilliant season. Carlos Baleba is not having a good season because we ruined him. He's taking a few zeros off his transfer fee there. They are all going to come in between. Angelo Stiller's probably the cheapest of those. I think he's probably the riskiest as well in terms of physical profile. Technically brilliant. Physically would be an adjustment, I would say, but he's probably the cheapest. And you'd probably go Wharton, belabor Anderson, just given the current power rankings.
Yeah.
But, a huge amount of spend there. Could we get one of them in the winter? Seems very unlikely. Very unlikely. Because, they all do need to sell.
Yeah.
But they don't need to sell until June.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think, there is, I know what you're saying about, a reason to spend money in January. I'm just not sure whether you could get a deal done in January. Like,
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Kobbie Mainoo out on loan, Conor Gallagher in. I'm not sure I'd love that, but
I'd be surprised if that happened.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right. Good note to end on. Speculation about transfers. Love it. We should just do a pod on that. Not talk about nothing but speculating. We could just AIify it, right? None of it's real anyway. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Check out Jamie's Substack at Subprime Goals. It is excellent analysis if you're interested in United's finances and operations. And you can find us on patreon.com/NQATpod. YouTube, if you're listening to this, or all the podcast apps. If you're watching, Jamie, thank you very much as always.
Thank you very much, Ed. It's a pleasure.
Very good. I am off to, I don't know what I'm doing today. Have you got a good weekend planned? You're going to Spurs. Early kickoff on a Saturday. I don't like it because, well, like it and I don't like it. If United lose, it ruins your entire weekend. The whole weekend's ruined. Yeah. But if United win, you're going to have a good one.
And I've got a friend's birthday party afterwards, so a perfect excuse to drown my sorrows if we do lose, and on to the next one.
Very good. I am going to watch that game 4:30 in the morning here, and I'm off to a venture capital conference all afternoon where I'm judging a competition. Sorry, startup founders looking for money. You might be ruined because I will be in a very bad mood or a very good mood.
There we go. Valuations going through the roof.
Yes, your ridiculous idea. Yeah, AI-powered transfer analysis. It's coming, folks. Bye now.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.